Hi everyone, meteorologist Brian Bennett, and here's your update on Hurricane Dorian for your Monday, September 2nd. As you can see, the hurricane is still right over Grand Bahama Island. It's been over the island for about 15 hours. That's roughly the equivalent of an EF4 tornado being over your home for about 15 hours. Hard to even fathom that amount of wind for that amount of time. And to be honest, that's probably not even the worst part of the hurricane right now. Let me show you some video of storm surge that's occurring on Grand Bahama. This is Freeport International Airport. It looks like the view out of a cruise ship, but it's 20 feet of storm surge covering the entire airport.
Has to be about 20 to
This is a
25 feet
view
above the
from
sea
the
level.
agricultural minister's
So
home in Freeport.
this is what
Obviously,
tends to
water is making it
happen.
into his home.
And I have neighbors that are in a far worse position.
Here's another home in Freeport, just showing you the power and devastation of storm surge. Unbelievable what's happening on the island right now. Here's a view of a radar picture. This is actually out of Melbourne. The hurricane is close enough that it can almost pick up the entire hurricane. And you can see in this loop that the storm really hasn't moved a whole lot. Still a very defined eye and also a very strong eye wall continuing to spin around the hurricane. The latest from the National Hurricane Center, it's moving at kind of a ridiculous 1 mile per hour. So the storm is nearly stationary over the island. Winds have decreased a little bit. I hesitate to use the word weaken because winds are blowing 150 miles per hour, which does make it a Cat 4 hurricane, but nonetheless still a very, very strong storm. The latest track from the Hurricane Center really hasn't changed much, riding right up the east coast of Florida and then possibly making a landfall as a weaker storm in parts of the Carolinas, something we'll have a little bit more time to keep an eye out for. Right now, though, there are all types of watches and warnings out for the east coast of Florida, indicating the possibility that this storm could still wobble just a little bit, that it could bring it on shore. And even if it doesn't come on shore, we're looking at storm surge and some strong winds along the immediate coastline. All right, let me drop some meteorology on you real quick to kind of give you an idea of what I think is going to happen with this hurricane and why. What we're looking at right here, this is actually the temperature of the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico. Very warm. That's where these hurricanes get their power from the latent heat of energy. But what happens if a hurricane sits in one location for a long period of time, then it actually stirs up the water, cools the water off a little bit, and actually with the cooler water, the storm can actually weaken. So on paper, a weaker storm would actually be a great thing, but let me show you why it's kind of a double-edged sword here in regards to a weakening storm. All right, first of all, real quick, this graphic here, winds basically in the lower atmosphere are blowing out of the east. That means the storm will be pushed towards Florida as far as what's happening in the lower atmosphere. The higher atmosphere, the winds are actually coming out of the west, which wants to push the storm away from the state of Florida. All right, with a very tall and strong hurricane, this is a cross section of basically what it looks like right now. This hurricane is going all the way, way up in the atmosphere, so it's a very tall storm. So it's being impacted by the easterly winds pushing on the storm and the westerly winds, which is kind of keeping it neutral, which makes it want to move more on a northerly path. Now, if the hurricane happens to weaken a little bit, then we don't have much of the storm in the upper atmosphere. It's more robust in the very lower parts of the atmosphere, which means it could be pushed a little more by those easterly winds, which could actually help push it towards the state of Florida a little bit more than perhaps what some of the models are calling for. I'm not saying it's going to make a direct landfall, but I am saying that it could have a little bit of an impact, helping the storm kind of wobble towards the state of Florida. So with that said, that's one of the things I'm keeping in mind in the forecast track based on the latest computer models, which I'll show you in a second. There is also a little bit of good news here in the steering currents. I've been talking about this for the last couple of days. The orange color here representing high pressure, the blue is Dorian, and this high pressure is the whole reason the storm was pushed westward. Otherwise, without that high, it would have moved due north, and we wouldn't even be talking about this storm right now. But nonetheless, the storm has has been forced to go around that high. But again, a little bit of good news here is that that high, as expected, has eroded a little bit, and now a trough, an area of low pressure, has replaced it, which is actually pulling the hurricane north. So tons of forces acting on this storm, and basically all of North America, but also at multiple levels of the atmosphere, which makes this track a little difficult to forecast. But I think that we've really narrowed it down pretty closely to what can be expected with this hurricane over the next day or two, especially in regards to Florida. But obviously, keeping our guard up as anything can and will happen with hurricanes. If you've lived in Florida for a while or anywhere along the coast, you know that hurricanes do have a mind of their own. But with that said, here's a look at the GFS model from 6Z overnight, and it's kind of the model that I feel like has the best handle on what's going to happen with this hurricane. So let's go into the future here with the winds, and let's go ahead and scoot ahead here. First of all, is there a possibility that the storm will move due west and hammer West Palm Beach? That's not going to happen. The storm's not going to move due west right into West Palm Beach and just keep on going. The storm is going to make that continued kind of west-northwest push. How far that west component is actually really the big question with what happens with this hurricane. But regardless, here's the GFS, and this is the forecast valid tomorrow afternoon. This is Tuesday afternoon around 2 p.m. And you can see the model's predicting wind gusts possibly right around 70 miles per hour right along the immediate coastline. You head inland and those winds die off quickly, so that parts of Polk County are experiencing wind gusts to maybe about 30 miles per hour. And again, this would be on your Tuesday afternoon. Heading through your Tuesday evening, here we are Tuesday evening, and the center of circulation will be roughly on the same latitude as Cape Canaveral. And at this point, we're looking at winds at Cape Canaveral possibly on the order of about 80 miles per hour, which is what we had pretty similar with Hurricane Matthew. So winds in this area, again, maybe gusting to 80 miles per hour. And the farther you head from the hurricane, obviously the weaker the winds get. Orlando could expect wind gusts on the order of anywhere from about 45 to 60 miles per hour. Polk County, 40 mile per hour winds. Highland County is about the same. Head over to Tampa, and we're looking at wind gusts maybe about 25 miles per hour, a bit more breezy along the immediate coastline where the wind is a bit more unabated from the friction of land. All right, let's go into the future a bit more. This is valid Tuesday night, and you can see wind gusts possibly 80, close to 90 miles per hour if the storm does happen to be this close to shore. It could go a little bit farther east, which obviously would lessen the winds a little bit, but based on this current track, these are the type of winds we could expect in the Daytona Beach area. Again, right along the immediate coastline is where we would see those strongest winds. Moving forward to Wednesday morning, again, we're seeing wind gusts in the St. Augustine area, possibly around 80 miles per hour. So hurricane force wind gusts, definitely possible, especially along the immediate coastline. Orlando area, still seeing those wind gusts anywhere from 45 to about 60 miles per hour. Tampa, maybe a wind gust to about 30 miles per hour. So really not too much of an impact on most of the Tampa Bay area. Again, we'll continue to watch the path of it to make sure it doesn't do some type of wacky last minute move to the west. But again, that's not really expected at this point. Here's a look as we move into Wednesday evening. The storm is kind of skirting the shore of Georgia, and I believe a state of emergency was just issued to try to get some funding ready for any damage that might occur in this area. But in this area, we could actually see wind gusts approaching hurricane force as well, so right around 70 miles per hour. Potential for St. Simon's Islands, Cumberland, Savannah, in that area. The storm then continues off to the north. It does weaken quite a bit, but it also gets closer to shore potentially in parts of the Carolinas, so that's something that will have to be watched very closely. Now, history does repeat itself. I mentioned this when I was living in New York and covering Hurricane Sandy. We were talking about storms that had occurred previously, and this storm is very, very similar to Hurricane Matthew. Here's the track of Hurricane Matthew, and I expect this path will be almost identical to what we had with Matthew. So here's Grand Bahama Island right here, and again, you don't worry about this part here. This will be obviously different, and Cuba is not going to be impacted by the storm, but basically this area and north is what I expect to be very similar. So basically Matthew 2.0 for parts of northeast Florida, Georgia, and much of the Carolinas as that storm moves off to the northeast. Here's a look at the satellite image from Matthew, and this is from 2016. So basically, this is what we can expect in northeast Florida as far as the satellite view goes in about a day and a half or so as the storm moves right up the east coast of Florida, and perhaps the outer eye wall doing the same thing that it did with Matthew. We could see this storm actually scrape parts of the Cape Canaveral area as well, which actually did cause some damage to parts of the NASA facilities out there on the Cape. All right, here's a track from Matthew, and the reason I want to show you this is just to show you how hurricanes do wobble. They really don't travel in a very straight line. If you've ever taken a tire wheel, like a bike tire, spun it, and then kind of try to turn that left and right, a hurricane works very similarly and actually tends to wobble back and forth. So this storm wobbled, and we're expecting a wobbling storm over the next 3 days or so as it continues to move off to the north. So here's some pictures of Matthew, and again, I expect very similar conditions. If not, this storm may actually be even a little bit stronger than what we had with Matthew. So here's Flagler Beach. It really damaged parts of the boardwalk there, and you can see some homes right along the beach. Lost parts of their shingles, even a bit of the roof. Here's a view, and again, this is a view from Flagler County. Here's a view from Putnam County. This is storm surge flooding in the Dunn's Creek area, showing that we had storm surge flooding with Matthew, and I expect storm surge flooding to occur with Dorian as it rides up the coast off the shore of parts of Florida and Georgia. So we could see pictures just like this popping up over the next couple of days. That was Putnam County. Duval County. Here is Jacksonville Beach, showing a little bit of storm surge and freshwater flooding that was experienced in that area back in 2016. So if you had a problem with Matthew in 2016, you're probably going to have a similar conditions occurring in here 2019 from Hurricane Dorian. This is a really useful map. Shows inundation or storm surge likelihood from Dorian, and this is from the National Hurricane Center, and it's an interactive map. If you would like to view this map, you can go to nhc.noaa.gov and click on the inundation map, and then you can actually zoom down to your area of where your greatest area of concern is, perhaps where you live, and it will show you what type of storm surge is expected in your location. All right, wrapping this video up. It is September now. September is the peak of hurricane season. Right now, to be honest with you, the map kind of looks like a kindergartner took a crayon to this map, as we're looking at several areas of possible development. Now, the good news here is, even though there might be a lot happening in the Atlantic and even the Western Gulf, none of these storms really look very impressive, and none of them at this moment really look like they want to impact the United States or really any land for that matter, other than perhaps a weaker storm moving into parts of eastern Mexico. Right now, it's all about Dorian. If anything else pops up or looks more concerning, you guys know I'll be there covering it for you. So that's the latest for now. Everybody stay safe out there. Wrap up whatever preparations you might be doing if you live, especially on the east coast of Florida or right along the coast in parts of Jacksonville or Daytona Beach. Please continue to keep a close eye on this storm for any possible changes to the forecast. All right, guys, everybody stay safe out there.